The great work. The great work is, before all things, the creation of man by himself, that is to say, the full and entire conquest of his faculties and his future. It is especially the perfect emancipation of his will, assuring him universal dominion over Roth and the domain of Magnesia, in other words, full power over the universal magical agent. This agent, disguised by the ancient philosophers under the name of the first matter, determines the forms of modifiable substance, and we can really arrive by means of it at metallic transmutation and the universal medicine. This is not a hypothesis, it is a scientific fact already established and rigorously demonstrable. Nicholas Flamel and Raymond Lully, both of them poor, indubitably distributed immense riches. Agrippa never proceeded beyond the first part of the great work, and he perished in the attempt, struggling to possess himself and to fix his independence. Now, there are two hermetic operations, the one spiritual, the other material, and these are mutually dependent. For the rest, all hermetic science is contained in the doctrine of Hermes, which is said to have been originally inscribed upon an emerald tablet. Its first articles have been already expounded, and those follow which are concerned with the operation of the great work. Thou shalt separate the earth from the fire, the subtle from the gross, gently, with great industry. It rises from earth to heaven, and again it descends from heaven to earth, and it receives the power of things above and of things below. By this means shalt thou obtain the glory of the whole world, and all darkness shall depart from thee. It is the strong power of every power, for it will overcome all that is subtle and penetrate all that is solid. Thus was the world created. To separate the subtle from the gross, in the first operation, which is wholly inward, is to liberate the soul from all prejudice and all vice, which is accomplished by the use of philosophical salt, that is to say, wisdom, of mercury, that is, personal skill and application, finally, of sulfur, representing vital energy and fire of will. By these are we enabled to change into spiritual gold things which are of all least precious, even the refuse of the earth. In this sense we must interpret the parables of the choir of philosophers, Bernard Trevis, Basil Valentine, Mary the Egyptian and other prophets of alchemy, but in their works, as in the great work, we must separate skillfully the subtle from the gross, the mystical from the positive, allegory from theory. If we would read them with profit and understanding, we must take them first of all as allegorical in their entirety, and then descend from allegories to realities by the way of the correspondences or analogies indicated in the one dogma. That which is above is proportional to that which is below, and reciprocally. The word art when reversed, or read after the manner of sacred and primitive characters from right to left, gives three initials which express the different grades of the great work. T signifies triad, theory and travail, R, realization, A, adaptation. In the 12th chapter of the ritual, we shall give the processes of adaptation and rise among the great masters, especially that which is contained in the Hermetic Fortress of Henry Conrad. We may refer our readers also to an admirable treatise attributed to Hermes Trismegistus and entitled Minerva Mundi. It is found only in certain editions of Hermes and contains, in allegories full of profundity and poetry, the doctrine of individual self-creation, or the creative law consequent on the harmony between two forces which are termed fixed and volatile by alchemists, and are necessity and liberty in the absolute order. The diversity of the forms which abound in nature is explained, in this treatise, by the diversity of spirits, and monstrosity by divergence of efforts. Its study and understanding are indispensable for all adepts who would fathom the mysteries of nature and devote themselves seriously to the search after the great work. When the masters in alchemy say that little time and money are needed to accomplish the works of science, above all when they affirm that one vessel is alone needed, when they speak of the great and unique Athena which all can use, which is ready to each man's hand, which all possess without knowing it, they allude to philosophical and moral alchemy. As a fact, the strong and resolute will can arrive in a short time at absolute independence, and we are all in possession of the chemical instrument, the great and sole Athena, which answers for the separation of the subtle from the gross and the fixed from the volatile. This instrument, complete as the world and precise as mathematics, is represented by the sages under the emblem of the pentagram or five-pointed star, which is the absolute sign of human intelligence. I will follow the example of the wise by forbearing to name it, it is too easy to divine. The tarot symbol which corresponds to this chapter was misconstrued by Jebelin and D.T. Ehler, who regarded it as the blunder of a German card maker. It represents a man with his hands bound behind him, having 2 bags of money attached to the armpits, and suspended by 1 foot from a gibbet formed by the trunks of 2 trees, each with the stumps of 6 lopped branches, and by a cross-piece, thus completing the figure of the Hebrew Tau M. The legs of the victim are crossed, while his head and elbows form a triangle. Now, the triangle surmounted by a cross signifies in alchemy the end and perfection of the great work, a meaning which is identical with that of the letter Tau, the last of the sacred alphabet. This hanged man is, consequently, the adept, bound by his engagements and spiritualized, that is, having his feet turned towards heaven. He is also the antique Prometheus, expiating by everlasting torture the penalty of his glorious theft. Vulgarly, he is the traitor Judas, and his punishment is a menace to betrayers of the great arcanum. Finally, for Kabbalistic Jews, the hanged man, who corresponds to their 12th dogma, that of the promised Messiah, is a protestation against the Saviour acknowledged by Christians, and they seem to say unto him still, "How canst thou save others, since thou couldst not save thyself?" In the Sefer Toldos Jeshu, an anti-Christian rabbinical compilation, there occurs a singular parable. Jeshu, says the rabbinical author of the legend, was traveling with Simon Bar Jonah and Judas Iscariot. Late and weary they came to a lonely house, and, being very hungry, could find nothing to eat except an exceedingly lean gosling. It was insufficient for 3 persons, and to divide it would be to sharpen without satisfying hunger. They agreed to draw lots, but as they were heavy with sleep, "Let us first of all slumber," said Jeshu, "whilst the supper is preparing. When we wake we will tell our dreams, and he who has had the most beautiful dream shall have the whole gosling to his own share." So it was arranged, they slept and they woke. "As for me," said Saint Peter, "I dreamed that I was the vicar of God." "And I," said Jeshu, "that I was God himself." "For me," said Judas hypocritically, "I dreamed that, being in somnambulism, I arose, went softly downstairs, took the gosling from the spit, and ate it." Thereupon they also went down, but the gosling had vanished altogether. Judas had a waking dream. This anecdote is given, not in the text of the Sefer Toldos Jeshu itself, but in the rabbinical commentaries on that work. The legend is a protest of Jewish positivism against Christian mysticism. As a fact, while the faithful surrendered themselves to magnificent dreams, the proscribed Israelite, Judas of the Christian civilization, worked, sold, intrigued, became rich, possessed himself of this life's realities, till he became in a position to advance the means of existence to those very forms of worship which had so long outlawed him. The ancient worshippers of the Ark remained true to the cultus of the strong box. The exchange is now their temple, and thence they govern the Christian world. The laugh is indeed with Judas, who can congratulate himself upon not having slept like Saint Peter. In archaic writings preceding the captivity, the Hebrew Tau was cruciform, which confirms further our interpretation of the 12th symbol of the Kabbalistic tarot. The cross, which produces 4 triangles, is also the sacred sign of the duodenary, and on this account it was called the key of heaven by the Egyptians. So E.T. Ehler, confused by his protracted researches for the conciliation of the analogical necessities of this symbol with his own personal opinion, in which he was influenced by the erudite Jebelin, placed in the hand of his upright